Gimbals are one of the most versatile tools, in my opinion, for freelance video creators. Personally, I think once you have a camera and a lens and you're trying to make money doing video, a gimbal may be the next thing that you should buy. And this little gimbal right here was a pleasant surprise for me. This is the ZHIYUN Weebill 3S. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but in this video, I'm going to actually use it on a real shoot and see if it can sway me from my preferred brand that I've used for almost the past 6 years now. And I'll also talk about my experience over the years with gimbals and my thoughts and opinions on this particular gimbal. If you don't know me, my name's Dustin, your video tour guide, and please keep your arms and legs inside your chairs at all times. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Let me tell you about my past experience with gimbals. First, they used to be very finicky and extremely hard to balance. The first gimbal I bought actually could not even balance the camera setup that I had, and it was not even that big of a setup. It was a Sony a7S with a 24-70 f4, not the G Master version, like the smaller 24-70. I was really bummed because everybody was using glide cams at the time, but I personally don't love glide cams, and they're actually really difficult for me to use because I have an injury in my wrist that made it really painful to use glide cams because most of the weight was in one hand. Sorry about that. But the first company that made not only a good gimbal, but a gimbal that could actually support the weight of my setup was ZHIYUN. That gimbal was the Crane 2, and man, it'll always live as a staple in my memory because it was now possible for me to get stable footage no matter where I was. But there was another company that entered the game soon after the release of the Crane 2, and it added some new additions that I was interested in. That was the DJI Ronin S. Basically, since 2018, I have stuck with DJI and have since upgraded to the RS2. It's somewhere in the dark background, but I've also used the RS3 a handful of times. The reason why I've stuck there is because ZHIYUN was adding things to their gimbals like this thing and this thing. And I've tried using these types of things on my Ronin because I thought I might like it, but I usually didn't. I just felt like I had less control if I attached things like this to the gimbal, or they just got in the way. Oh, and doing like the overhead setup for a gimbal where it hangs right here in the middle, it was just very inconvenient, and after like 2 takes, your upper back feels like it's going to give out. And so now, here are the full disclosures. ZHIYUN did send me this gimbal in exchange for a video, and they also sent me this little light. It's the Molis X100 or something like that. Little plug for the light. I also love this light. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in a very innovative run and gun light. But all my opinions on this gimbal are my own, so let's get back to my experience with it. The one thing that was pretty surprising to me was those little attachments that I said that I didn't like that I actually ended up liking on this gimbal. Like, for example, this handle. One of the coolest things I discovered you could do is you could pass the gimbal through different objects to get a really unique shot that would be kind of difficult to get without something like this. Now, sure, you could attach something else to it, but this one is just so convenient on how it can move and be adjusted and be removed at the same time. And especially at wider focal lengths, this kind of move looks really cool. Also, it's got a light on it. I used it a few times when I was getting a B-roll shot where it was just like a little too dark and I didn't have a light handy, so I just turned this one on and it was, very convenient. I can definitely see a lot of scenarios where this light would come in handy. For the shoot, the gimbal performed flawlessly. It did take me a little time to get used to the different layout and the way that you change between the different modes, but with some time, I'm sure it'll basically become second nature. I do need to tune the dead zone on this. I noticed in the follow mode, it was a bit too touchy in the default setting on the tilt axis. It would kind of like look like I was bouncing or like tilting like this as I was moving, but that's not really a hard thing to fix. I also haven't used a gimbal this size before. I just felt extremely nimble during this whole shoot. See what I did there? It's a Nimble gimbal. But yeah, I'm used to getting bigger gimbals just in case I need to run a heavier load, but the disadvantage to doing that is that it's hard to pack the gimbal and take it with you on the go or when you travel on like a plane, for example. Oh, and this thing also has a very intuitive way to switch from landscape to portrait. You don't even have to remove the camera from the plate. You just slide this little piece off right here, rotate it, and then slide it back right on there and your camera's already in vertical mode. Oh, and also the wrist support was also really nice. Ever since gimbals have kind of gone to this sort of design right here, I haven't really had much problems with my wrists unless I'm getting like lower down shots because of the way I have to hold the gimbal. But this little handle, yeah, it's very handy, and it gives me a nice support for my wrist as well, and it can be adjusted very easily. Overall, I don't really have much gripe to say about the gimbal, and I know that there's a million videos out there that will probably walk you through how to set this up more properly, but I do have two kind of things that I want to mention about the gimbal. The first one is the carry bag that I think you can optionally get with it. Hang on, let me go grab it. You know, this bag is really cool, but it just does not make sense to be the carrying case for this. It's just huge for such a small gimbal, for one. And like, it's a cool bag for sure. It came into like this middle part right here, but I would have preferred something much smaller. And I don't think that I'll ever carry at least this in here. I'll find something else to put in here, but yeah, I appreciate the bag and it's cool, like I said, but I don't think it's very practical for carrying this gimbal. It's just really big. The other one is quite an annoyance for no reason, in my opinion. So I wanted to know what the payload capacity was for this thing, and I literally could not find it anywhere. The only thing that I could find was that it could hold up to a 24 to 70 millimeter lens on the Lumix S5 II, which is a little less than 4 pounds. I even reached out to ZHIYUN and asked them what the payload capacity was, and they said the same thing. They wouldn't give it to me. Like, really? I don't understand why this information is being withheld. And ZHIYUN said it's because, well, when you get a higher payload than a 24 to 70, it can be really difficult to balance. But I feel like that shouldn't really matter because that's up to me to decide and figure out when it comes to balancing. And also, I did balance the Sigma 24 to 70 on here on the Lumix S5 II, and it was fairly difficult to balance. So keep that in mind if this is going to be your first gimbal. It's easy to balance like smaller lenses on here, really easy, and this is actually the lenses that I used for the shoot. There was a couple others that I used, but yeah, they were all the same exact size and weight. But keep that in mind if you're going to be balancing a 24 to 70, it is kind of difficult to balance. There's also even other ZHIYUN gimbals that give me the payload capacity, so I don't know. So to be safe, I would say that you could hold about 5 pounds. Oh, and you can also remove this thing if you don't like it. It's really easy to remove these. You just have to unscrew this and you can use it without the handle and the wrist support. So just keep that in mind. If you don't like this, you don't have to use it. Overall, I'm really happy with my experience, and I'll definitely use this little gimbal, especially when like I'm traveling by plane somewhere and I just don't really need a bigger one. Before you go to, be sure to check out my website because I've launched the Filmmaker's Closet, like this hoodie here. There's also a color checker shirt, which should be coming out as well. And also the hat, the aspect ratio brim. If you not only want to look good on your shoots, but support the channel, may not be a bad idea to check out. Oh, and every merch purchase, you can add my LUTs to your cart and you can get them for free. Or you can just support the channel by hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified of future uploads. Till the next video though. Happy filming.